Well, good afternoon, everybody, and a very, very warm welcome to our Council of Governors Annual Members Meeting 2022. My name is Sean Lyons, and I'm privileged to be the chair of Northern Lincolnshire and Gould Foundation Trust, and to be able to welcome you here today is a great privilege. Today is actually a hybrid event for us, so we've got a physical event in the room here at the Sands Centre. And we've also got operating this as a Microsoft Teams live event, which means that we're able to hook into any member of the public who's interested to connect with us today. So at the moment, I can see we've got 4 external attendees. We may get more during the course of today, and those attendees are able to lodge questions in a live sense, and we'll try and field those during the course of today's event. So it's my pleasure, as I say, to be able to welcome you. We've got a very interesting agenda, I'd like to think. We're going to receive the overview of last year, the annual report and accounts and trust priorities from Dr. Peter Redding and Lee Bond. We'll then have our auditor's report from Mazars. And then we have a guest speaker who is Sue Symington, who's the Integrated Care System Chair. And then finally, and very exciting, we'll have a broadcast from Grimsby, which is looking at our emergency department and talking about the future of emergency care. We're really excited that in the next few days we'll be opening up a brand new emergency centre in the Grimsby Hospital, and that'll be followed very soon after that by the equivalent in Scunthorpe. So we're very excited about that. And following that, Ian Reiki will be talking to us about governor elections and our need to continue to connect with our public via the governor role. So we're very pleased that Ian will be able to present some statistics about vacancies, and hopefully we'll get interest from members of the public as we talk through today's agenda. So I'd just like to say just a couple of things, really, mainly to say thank you to everybody that's been involved in magnificently handling the challenges that have been brought towards the NHS and in our trust over the last year. It's been another year of extreme pressure, fantastic effort, and the response has just been, humbling, really. And I'm really pleased to be able to say those thanks on behalf of governors and the board to all our staff. We have made a lot of progress, particularly within capital investments in terms of scanning facilities, for example. And as I mentioned, our 2 new emergency departments, very significant capital investment, which is great. And we look forward to commissioning those and being able to give our patients a better experience by so doing. IT and digital progresses very significantly, as well as we join our arrangements with our partners in Hull. And there is, an ongoing interest and determination to get closer and closer with our partners, and particularly with the Hull Trust, as we not merge, that's the wrong word, as we move forward to a greater working relationship for the benefit of our patients. So I'd like to say a final thanks to our governors for their challenge, wisdom and guidance through the course of the year. It's really valuable. You are our connection with our membership, and we really wanted this next year to embrace that relationship even further and get more connected with our public. So I'll stop there and move the meeting into its formal stages by asking for any apologies for absence. So Alison, I think you can help me with that, please. Yeah, okay, thank you very much. And any declarations of interest from people in the room or outside, if we can get anybody? I think the outside would be relevant, but any declarations of interest? No? Okay, thank you very much for that. And the final point, the beginning of this is 1.4, which is to receive the approved minutes from the previous meeting held on the 13th of September 2021. So can I accept that? Can we say they're okay? They've been agreed previously, I understand. So we're receiving those today. Thank you very much. Right, I'm now going to hand over to Dr. Peter Redding, who's our Chief Executive. And after that, Lee Bond will talk to us about our financial performance. So over to you, Peter. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman. And can I just check? Can you hear me? Okay, so I'm trying to get the balance right between being seen and being heard. I'll get it right. Okay, so it's my privilege to talk to you about some of the activities that we've been conducting over the last year, but also because this meeting obviously falls halfway through the year that we're already in, it'll be a sort of a discussion about that as well. So if we can just go through that. Go to move slide.
There might be a little bit of a delay.
Okay, all right, okay. Right, so I think this is the agenda. One more,
sorry. Apologies.
Thank you. So just to give you an indication of some of the activity that we've been conducting as a trust over the last year, you can see from these numbers, obviously there was a reduction in 2021 during the course of the pandemic in a variety of ways, although we still saw huge numbers of patients. And if you top that list up, you come to well over 600,000 plus patients being looked after in different ways by our organisation over the year. We are now approaching pre-pandemic levels across the range of areas. We're still catching up in terms of some of the elective work, but we're catching up faster, I have to say, than most of our neighbours and many parts of the country. And in terms of non-elective activity, our emergency departments are sadly under more pressure than probably they've ever been. When I was in Grimsby A&E first thing this morning, my first question is how many people are waiting for beds? Because as I walk around, I see patients in beds having their breakfast, which is something you would never have seen in an ED previously. Now we actually have a full trolley load of food being delivered to each of our EDs twice a day to make sure that our patients who are stuck there get some proper nutrition whilst they're there. It was 21. And that, the team said, pretty good day. Only 21 people waiting for a bed. And you can imagine what that means if that's actually a relatively good day. This is for a variety of reasons. It's due to pressure of demand, but it's also to do with the difficulties of discharge. And although we are up for a Health Service Journal Award in the next month, we're a finalist for one for our discharge arrangements. So we're actually doing pretty well by most of the metrics. In spite of this, we are still experiencing a very large number of beds where we're unable to discharge patients who are ready for discharge. And again, you'll find this position replicated across the country. So can we move to the next slide, please? So what was the impact of COVID over 21-22? Obviously, it was the second stage. I won't talk about waves, second stage of the pandemic. So the numbers were reduced, and thankfully the ratio of cases to deaths changed very substantially, because you'll be aware that the later waves of COVID were less lethal, thankfully, than the earlier waves. But nonetheless, you can see what was being what the impact of the pandemic was upon our hospitals. And can I just at this moment just pay tribute to our fabulous staff who managed the pandemic for 2 long years. Many of them working in the most difficult of circumstances, in very heavy PPE, long shifts, really challenging. Long shifts are challenging at the best of times, but much more when you're fully kitted out in PPE. But more than that, it's also the staff in various support departments who kept this going. And I'd like to pay tribute particularly to our cleaning teams and our portering teams and our catering teams who supported throughout intensively to make sure that we can continue to sustain our services. What we did, what the impact was on other services was obviously across the whole country, a massive backlog built up in terms of elective surgery, diagnostics and so on. And the whole country is now focused on trying to reduce that backlog at pace to make sure that patients are seen as swiftly as possible, and I'll come back to that. But also the waiting times in our EDs changed, sadly, very adversely. We are still seeing a small number of COVID cases, and around the country, the number of cases is beginning to creep up again. So we'll see what impact that has over the coming winter, but we're also being warned to expect a very difficult winter with respect to flu. So looking forward from an emergency care point of view, I think it's fair to say that all parts of the UK are looking forward with a lot of trepidation to a winter that looks like it could be very, very tough. At the same time, though, we are continuing to reduce the number of patients who are waiting. And when you look at the metrics that we have compared to many of our neighbours and around the country, we are one of the best performers in terms of elective recovery across the country. And some of our achievements in terms of reducing long waits outstretch either any of our neighbours or, in many cases, most people in the most trusts in the country. As a consequence, and today I've had to answer an MP letter saying, is it true that you are looking after Hull patients in preference to Northern Lincolnshire patients? Well, it's half true. We've taken 800 Hull patients over the last few months, and we'll be taking more through the winter because Hull's waiting lists are very substantially longer than ours. And we are a national health service, and we are very explicitly expected to provide what is called mutual aid. If a neighbouring trust has people waiting longer than we do, we are being asked to provide facilities to treat those patients. Most of the facilities we've provided have been at Goole, and most of the patients we've taken have been orthopaedic, although there have been modest numbers in urology and some other specialties. And we're doing it for a very good reason, because it helps to make sure that there is clinical prioritisation across the country, so far as that is possible, and also those who've been waiting, in many cases, more than 2 years for surgery are able to be seen quickly. The other thing that came out of the pandemic, though, was it was a time of huge innovation. It was huge innovation across the country, but I have to say, we're very proud of many of the things that we did locally. Not only did we follow the national trend to introduce virtual consultations in a variety of different ways, in a way that we had never done before, and we are sustaining those. But also, I have to say, we used the pandemic, necessity being the mother of invention, to create new pathways in a variety of different ways. And we've sustained many of those. So if you go to Global House, our community headquarters just down the road, and you go into our community response team, you'll find a GP sitting there. We call it GP CRT, GP Community Response Team. It's made a massive difference to the way our community response team has been able to perform in response to patient needs. And it's a model that we are advocating for others, and it's got us shortlisted for a Health Service Journal Award last year when we were shortlisted for Community Provider of the Year. Equally, if you look at what we've done in our hospitals in terms of emergency care pathways, with the urgent care service on both sites, the same-day emergency care model, and so on, we are now being seen as an exemplar for other parts of the region as to how to do pathways in emergency care. And I say that not based upon what I would say, or Kate Wood, our medical director, or Sean Stacey, our Q. I'm saying it based upon what visitors from regional and national level, including most recently Sir David Sloman, the Chief Operating Officer of the NHS, have said that the models that we have introduced, led by our clinicians, and I emphasise that, led by our clinicians, because our mantra is that we are clinically led and managerially enabled. So what we try to do is get the best services designed by the people who understand services best, which is our clinical staff. And that's what we've done with emergency care, and that's why it's now being rolled out as a model in other parts of the country. And I know our colleagues at Hull are looking very actively at it at the moment, but also it's being advocated for many others around the region as a model. Look at what NLAG are doing and see where it goes. So can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. That said, I remember the days when we used to get 98% of A&E patients in the doors and out of the doors or into a bed in 4 hours, because that was the national standard. And certainly I've worked in trusts where we achieved it day in, day out. We used to approach that when I arrived here a few years ago. Sadly, as a result of the pandemic and all the pressures I've just described, our performance on the 4-hour target has been averaging 63% over the last year. Now, that is obviously dramatically worse than the 98% target. But interestingly, or maybe sadly, we are still actually in the middle of the pack in terms of regional comparison on 4-hour performance. So the good models that we've introduced, which I've just described, are having an impact in terms of relative position. But that said, the demand on our services is huge. And my office at Grimsby is right above where the ambulances wait. And certainly when I got in at 7:30 yesterday morning, there were 6 ambulances parked outside. Some nights when I go home, there'll be 10 or 11 parked outside. This would have been unheard of before the pandemic. But sadly, if you went to Lincoln County or Boston or Peterborough or Doncaster or Hull, you would find similar numbers, particularly to the south of us in the EMAS patch. East Midlands Ambulance Service is struggling more than Yorkshire Ambulance Service. On the waiting list, though, let's celebrate. Let's celebrate not just reduced long waiters, providing mutual aid to Hull, but also we now manage our waiting lists in the way that others are now trying to copy. We call it full risk stratification. What do we mean by that? What we mean is that when someone is waiting for a procedure or waiting for a test result, we keep an eye on them to make sure that those who are most at risk clinically don't get lost. That someone, by virtue of waiting longer than we would like, don't suffer an adverse clinical outcome. And we built on, actually, a practice, what we used to call clinical harm reviews, designed by Kate Wood, our medical director, and some of her colleagues before the pandemic to deal with what then were some of the longest waiting lists in the country, because that's where NLAG was. And we've now managed to apply it to the current situation. It gives us confidence insofar as you can ever be confident, and I sort of cross my fingers as I say that, because I know this is about patients' lives, but it gives us confidence that when someone is waiting a long time for a test result or for a procedure, that they are not going to suffer an adverse consequence, because those who are at risk of suffering adverse consequences by delays are spotted by us and are brought forward. We don't just do emergency care and community care and elective care, we also deliver babies. And as you will be aware, from a political point of view and a national public concern point of view, maternity services are right at the top of the list for the country at the moment, and have been for the last couple of years, on the back of the horrible stories which have emerged from places like Shrewsbury and Telford, Nottingham, Sheffield, East Kent, where maternity service after maternity service has been found to be dramatically worse, and the consequences for mothers and babies have been appalling, going back over many years. Dame Donna Ockenden has been reviewing these services, as you know, and her reports, 2 of them now, have been published, and we have worked flat out to implement the recommendations of those reports. To give you some comfort, alongside this, we have achieved for the first time for many years all 10 of the standards of the Clinical Negligence Scheme for Trust Maternity Services standards, which gives us a degree of confidence that what we're doing is right. And we have a very powerful partnership with Maternity Voices, the local Maternity Voices group, which again gives us a degree of, if you like, soft intelligence and insight and assurance about the culture of our services. That said, we've got a CQC report being published in a few weeks. And in that report, they will be reviewing our maternity services. So let's wait and see before we get too confident and too complacent. And you know, when our neighbours in Sheffield went from outstanding to inadequate in one step for their maternity services, as happened a few months ago, you have to be conscious that pride comes before a fall. So I mentioned the CQC. We've been due a full CQC inspection for the last 18 months, but because of the pandemic and other priorities for CQC, we've been delayed and delayed and delayed. Finally, they arrived in June, and then they also returned in July. And they inspected the majority of our services. They didn't inspect our community services, but they inspected, I think, Kate, everything else. And they did a well-led review. I know their draft report has been completed. Unfortunately, due to the very sad events, the very sad loss of Her Majesty the Queen, it's caused some problems in terms of the processing at the CQC end. So we won't be getting their draft report now until the end of October. We then do a factual accuracy check, and subject to that, we can expect the report to be published possibly as early as November, possibly December, and with a slight possibility of it going back beyond Christmas. And we're waiting to see whether that report will do what we believe our staff deserve, which is to be lifted out of special measures. But let's wait. So what about strategically? Humber Acute Services Review is something we've talked to governors and members about before. Ivan McConnell at the back is the lead for it for both ourselves and Hull, and he's done a fabulous job with his team. We've made immense progress, and we are a whisker away from being able to go out to public consultation on it. But for a variety of reasons to do with political circumstances and our desire to get the work really absolutely totally nailed down, we've advised, jointly with Hull, the Integrated Care Board, which will be responsible for public consultation, to delay consultation until after the council elections next year. So you may have heard we were aiming for November this year. That was a published priority from the Trust. We took the decision a few weeks ago with the ICB and with Hull that we will put it back till June. And we think we'll be able to do it more thoroughly and more effectively then. But all the work has been going on in terms of developing models of care and so on. So tremendous progress. Next slide, please, Simon. What about our fabulous staff? Well, first of all, I just want to say again, what they have done, what our staff, every single one of them, those really on the front line, those who support the front line directly, like our cleaning and portering staff, or those who are in services that are more remote from the front line, they have continued to work flat out through the pandemic. In common with the rest of the country, we're carrying huge numbers of vacancies. The country as a whole, as you know, has 130,000 vacancies across the health service. That's pretty close to 10% vacancies. Depending upon which part of our workforce you look at, we reflect that national position, and that means, first of all, that we're hugely dependent upon people working extra shifts, but also agency staff, and quite often we are running services with gaps in those services. And sadly, you'll find that everywhere. And of course, when that happens, it puts extra pressure on those who are working. We're working flat out on recruitment. We have managed to recruit a substantial number of healthcare support workers, although I have to say the labour market that we are in for healthcare support workers, or healthcare assistants as they're often known, has changed dramatically post-Brexit. And we are now competing in a very difficult labour market with Primark and Tesco and local authority social care and so on. And we're finding it more difficult to recruit, but we are succeeding. What we're having to do is revamp the way we keep our staff. And that's where our focus is at the moment. Not just on recruitment days, and you will have seen that we've had 2 big recruitment days this month, where we do a sort of one-stop shop to try and recruit healthcare support workers, but also we're looking really hard at what it is that means that we sometimes recruit people and after 6 weeks they say, this wasn't for me. So what do we do wrong in terms of briefing them in advance, preparing them and assessing them? So Christine Brereton, our Director of People over there, is with Ellie Monkhouse and Mel Sharp and the Chief Nurse team, looking really creatively at what it is that we need to do to make a job at NLAG as a healthcare support worker really attractive. With registered nurses, you can see we've managed to appoint an awful lot over the last year. We've recruited, is it about 150 now, Mel, overseas nurses. Absolutely excellent staff. I don't know whether any of you have managed to meet some of them, but I have to say we're recruiting people, particularly from Ghana and Nigeria, who are absolutely buzzing with experience already and so on. Blending them into our workforce requires give and take on all sides, but we have a really talented pipeline. And likewise, we've been more successful than for a long time, I think it's fair to say, Kate, in terms of recruiting doctors, and the numbers you can see there tell the story. We know, though, from our staff surveys, where we are still, sadly, in the bottom 5 in the country, that we need to do more to change the culture of our organisation. So earlier this year, Christine Brereton and her people team designed, and then we launched what we call a culture transformation programme, which is very wide-ranging, designed to shift some of the behaviours which many of our staff sadly find toxic. This is long-term work. I know one or two governors have said, well, Peter, why doesn't it happen over the next year? Sorry, we are working with deep-rooted problems which extend, I have to say, beyond the boundaries of our hospitals and our community services, because we have a very static, very stable population locally. Part of that is a lot of work around leadership, but to get that started, I have to say, when Christine arrived in January 2021, the first thing I asked her to do was restructure the people directorate. So last year, in 21-22, a huge focus was put into that to make it fit for purpose. And I have to say, I genuinely believe it is now. Next slide, please, son. I'm nearly finished. Right. The chairman's already given some really important headlines about our capital developments, but we've made immense progress, and you'll know from last year that we had secured the biggest capital investment programme this organisation had for a generation, and that is now beginning to turn into new buildings and new equipment and new systems, and you can see some of those there. So on Wednesday, and I'm told 10 o'clock in the morning, we will be taking our first patients into the new ED at Grimsby, and you'll see, I don't want to steal Natalie Till's thunder. We've got a video for you in a few minutes, which will give you a flavour of it. But I had my latest walk around this morning, I have to say, and it takes my breath away. And don't underestimate the impact on staff. So when I was in ED first thing this morning, a couple of staff nurses came up to me and said, Peter, we're so excited about moving into the new building. It's giving us all a real lift in spite of all the pressure we're under. They volunteered that. I didn't ask it. And it's all the little things. It's like the fact there are drip stands that hang down from the ceiling. It's like the fact there's a huge staff room, which is really well equipped. It's like the fact that the new children's area is absolutely gorgeous to look at, and great credit to HealthTree, and Neil Gammon is the chair of HealthTree Foundation for fundraising to equip it. You know, there's a virtual piano on the floor in the waiting area where children can jump up and down and they play the notes and the music comes out, and that's just one of the features. This is special. Many of you may have seen, or sadly had to use, our back-to-back MRI suite at Grimsby, which we opened last spring. That again really is state of the art. Alongside that, we're continuing working on the new ED at Scunthorpe, which is due to open Jug in, is it April? January. It's usually me who's the optimist on these things. So thank you, that's more positive. But alongside that, we'll be doing a lot of infrastructure work, strengthening our medical gases, particularly oxygen supply. Grimsby has a new £2.5 million fire alarm system, and we've just set aside the money to commission a similar new fire alarm system for Scunthorpe. The new MRI suite at Scunthorpe opened in March, and at Goole, we finally got rid of the last coal-fired boiler in the NHS. It was a race between us and City Hospital in Nottingham, the last two. They actually got theirs out first, so we had that sort of badge of having the only coal-fired boiler in the NHS for a few months, but it's now gone. Alongside that, we're ambitious for the future, and many of you will know the new hospitals programme that the government is trying to manage or trying to fund. We submitted a bid we're jointly with Hull, for £720 million investment, which includes, from an NLAG point of view, a brand new hospital in Scunthorpe Town Centre, if we are successful, and £120 million worth of investment into DPOW. Let's wait and see. We were meant to have been told last autumn as to whether we were on the shortlist. It's been delayed and delayed. We all know what's going on with the economy nationally, so let's not hold our breath about that. But we're told that of the 120 odd bids that went in, we are considered to be one of the best. Whether being one of the best is good enough, time will tell. And if we're not successful, I have to say, then it's back to the drawing board, because the state of some of our buildings, particularly Scunthorpe, means that we will have to find other solutions in terms of funding upgrades and substantial rebuilds. The chairman also mentioned digital. So Shauna McMahon, our Chief Information Officer, is now Joint Chief Information Officer with Hull. She took over Hull's digital services on the 1st of April. And you can see there the range of things that she's been introducing to strengthen what we do in terms of our digital services and make life easier for our clinicians above all. But alongside that, we're pursuing a single electronic patient record and so on. And joining up what we do with Hull is working really, really well. It gives us a broader base for staffing. It gives us an opportunity to join up patient information systems, which, given that our patients are often treated in Hull as well as in NLAG, is really important. But it also, I think, allows us to secure more funding, because digital funding is so important. Next slide, please. So what are we doing for the rest of this year? Top of our list of priorities, which you should have seen if you are governors many months ago, because I brought it to the Council of Governors. Top of the list is our people, and particularly around recruitment and retention, culture, training, development, and their health and well-being. Urgent emergency care stands out as a second priority, and I mentioned the winter. We talked about cancer and elective waiting time reductions in the CQC report. We talked about capital. Lee will talk about financial and management in a moment, so I'll stop there. And of course, there has public consultation. So these are the things we're going to try and pursue this year, alongside a plethora of other things. We are pursuing health inequalities work, the green agenda, and so on. So just because these are our top priorities doesn't mean it's the only stuff we're doing. Thank you. I think that's it from me. Thank you very much for listening. I'll hand you over to Lee Bond, who's our Joint Chief Financial Officer with Hull. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Afternoon, everybody. In 2 days' time, I've been here 2 years, but this first time I've had the pleasure of addressing the annual members meeting, as I was on leave at this time last year. So for those of you who don't know me, my name's Lee Bond. I'm the Chief Finance Officer. On your tables, you have copies of the annual report and accounts. If you turn to page 201, you get to the start of the accounts. If you turn to page 260, you get to the end of the accounts. I thought we probably wouldn't go through 60 pages of accounts this afternoon. So I have a number of slides. But as ever, if you do have any questions about the numbers, then we'll try, or I'll try to answer them. So if we just move on a slide, please. So the first thing, in terms of the sort of statutory performance role that today's meeting sort of brings with it. The role of one of the roles of the finance director each year is to try and pull together a set of financial accounts for the organisation that meet a certain set of standards, and then we have a process at the end of the year with our external auditors, and Mark's going to talk in a little while, where they basically mark my homework and or mark the team's homework. I suppose I am pleased to say that this year, as we have in previous years, received a true and fair view of the financial position. The accounts were prepared in accordance with proper standards, and from my perspective, it's always very pleasing to get a good, clean audit opinion. Just go to the next statement, please. So, in terms of that opinion, the actual wording is there, that the audit evidence is sufficient and appropriate, and most importantly, there are not any material uncertainties or events or conditions that would lead anyone to think that the accounts are anything other than a true and fair representation of the organisation's activities. So in terms of that, the accounts are a good reflection of what the organisation has managed to deliver in the previous year. Next slide, please. So, numbers. It's really interesting, this part, because for the old school amongst us, we sort of look at income and expenditure. And then you get into the NHS and things slightly change. So if I look at the face of my income and expenditure account, it looks like I made a £10 million surplus, £10.4 million surplus. which is a good place to be. However, within that, there are a number of interesting items which the NHS will adjust for. And in adjusting for it, it takes best part of £10 million out of that, and we get down to a figure of £86,000. Our control total, so the figure that was set for us to achieve at the start of the year was a break-even position. So we managed to achieve just in excess of 86, with the £86,000, a small surplus. There was adjustments, impairments, so that's a revaluation of our land and buildings. The biggest one in there, £11 million, is a grant, and that was a grant that we received from the public sector decarbonisation scheme, which was it referred, actually, as Peter just talked about, part of it was the removal of the coal-fired boiler in Goole, and then a number of other schemes that we've started but not completed yet at the Scunthorpe site. We did have some, it says there, DHSC procured inventory. So these are stocks that were brought by Department of Health, principally in the actions to manage COVID, and that's also about the donated COVID-19 assets below it. All of those technical items get stripped out by the NHS, and we get judged on that bottom line 86, which, as I said, is marginally better than a break-even position. So a good place to be at the end of the year. Next slide, please. In terms of the way in which the finance systems worked in 21-22, for those of you who were sat here last year, I'm sure Brian will have mentioned that last year, the previous year, so 2021, marked a significant change to the finance regime in the NHS, with the introduction, far larger introduction of block contract arrangements as the NHS system struggled to contain and manage the pandemic. Block funding continued for the vast majority of our contracts last year, and I'll show you that in a moment or two. Obviously, with some inflationary uplifts, we still got an amount for COVID. And we also got a separate amount for COVID testing and also the vaccination programme, which is what we would have expected to. There are certain drugs and devices that are of a sufficiently high volume or high value and low volume that they are considered to be too risky, is probably the wrong word, but the decision is that they are procured nationally, and so we buy them, but it gets paid for as what they call a pass-through. So that's just a straight recharge to the centre. And the final issue is that an incentive payment that was introduced, basically to get our activity and to incentivise organisations across the NHS to recover their activity and improve on historic levels of activity, with something called the Elective Recovery Fund, and we'll see that again in a moment. So, in a graphical format, you can quite easily see that the lion's share of the money that we got last year, that sort of 75% there, is through block income. And actually the second largest amount, which is a further, I think, £38 million, is also specialist services income. So the vast majority of the money we got was on a block. So I send out 12 invoices for that, and that's one a month, job done. And that's actually pretty easy to audit, I suspect. The bits around the edges are the more difficult bits. And the bits that I'm just going to highlight within that are, we received £16.5 million last year for education, training and research. So our activities in the field of doctor, nurse, AHP training generate £16.5 million worth of income. The Elective Recovery Fund and COVID funding total £30 million. And I've highlighted those specifically because they are almost treated as being non-recurrent. So they were expected by the centre as being one-offs, i.e. you'll spend it, but because COVID's gone, you'll not have to spend it again. That may or may not be true. So but even at 30 million, and it looks on there that they're quite sort of small pieces of that pie chart. 30 million pounds is not an insignificant number. Next slide, please. So what do we spend our money on? As ever, the vast majority of our costs are staffing. So it's just under 2/3 at 60. I think it says 68% there, so just over 2/3 there on staffing, with the supplies and services being the second biggest. One of the things that always interests me when I look at this particular slide each year is the third largest area of spend in the organisation, and that's clinical negligence. So our clinical negligence, our insurance bill for the work that the organisation has done and the mistakes that the organisation has made, total £15 million. So again, not a small insurance policy that the organisation is having to subscribe to as part of the NHS. And interestingly, that's the same, pretty much the same in just about every acute organisation. That the single largest item of non-pay spend in the trust is the clinical negligence. So that's where we spent our money, totaling just under £500 million. Next slide, please. COVID, £13 million. So 2.7% of what we spent on COVID, or we classed as being COVID related. Again, not unexpectedly, the vast majority of that was staffing, principally related to us opening up more beds and increasing the staffing levels on the wards to reflect the intensity and the acuity of the patients' conditions and the volume of patients that we had in the year. Not an insignificant amount of money also spent on testing and vaccination, almost £2 million. That amount there, 2.7%, is pretty standard again across the acute sector over the previous 2 years. So just moving away from the sort of the income and expenditure base and just looking a little bit more at the strength of the organisation's financial position and the balance sheet. The trust asset base, or fixed asset base in particular, £244 million at March 22. The vast majority of that is owned. So as you can see there, 97% is that big blue block on the left hand side. And the vast majority within that are buildings. Interestingly, the land that we own is actually only valued at about £10 million. So we are quite a capital intensive business. There's quite a big investment in our land and buildings, and in operating those land and buildings, we are very heavily reliant on our staffing. As Peter mentioned, and as the chairman mentioned a few moments ago, quite a significant fixed asset investment programme over the last 12 months, totaling just shy of £60 million. And you can see within there some of the developments that Peter and Sean have mentioned. Notably, you've got the investments in the emergency departments and the AAU at just shy of £26 million. You've got the back-to-back MRI scanners at the top there, and you can see right at the bottom you've got the donated buildings, which are the coal-fired boiler removal and the borehole and associated works at Scunthorpe. Interestingly, you've also got within that, you've also got some regulatory compliance work. So we have some anti-ligature work, and you can start to see some of the things that are related to the response to the pandemic. So you've got some investment in infrastructure with oxygen infrastructure in particular being upgraded across the hospitals. Moving forward. In terms of debt seems to be quite topical in the headlines at this moment in time. So we've included this slide just to show the level of debt that the organisation has at this moment in time in terms of long-term debt. We've got 2 contracts, both of which expire within the next 7 years, both at just over 2% interest, totaling less than £10 million. So it's not like the organisation has a significant debt overhead. It's got the just the £9.5 million worth of loans that we are paying off each year. So what happened in the end? So our non-current assets increased. So that is effectively the investment program in our fixed assets. Our cash position got better, and we've now, at the end of the year, we had cash in the bank at just shy of £60 million, and our borrowings are, I think, in a reasonable position at £9.5 million. More importantly, and reflecting, I think, the role that the organisation has within the local economies, we have continued to pay in excess of 90% of our suppliers within 30 days, both in value and number terms. So it's quite important for me to make sure that we continue to do that, because there are a lot of local businesses, particularly when we're talking about the capital programme, a lot of local businesses that are dependent on the cash flow, or because they're quite small businesses, not dependent on cash flow. So it's important that we are playing our part there. And there's not really an excuse if I've got £59 million in the bank for me not to be paying the bills. So we are doing that, and in excess of 90%, which I think is a good performance. Looking ahead, we exited the previous year with an underlying deficit that we thought was around £15 million. You will recall a few moments ago I put up a slide about income. Within that, there was nearly £30 million of COVID and other income, which I said maybe non-recurrent, or there was an expectation as non-recurrent. The increase in beds that we've put in, the increase in staffing that we've put into our existing bed base, I'm not sure will ever be taken out from a safety and a quality perspective. And yet the centre and the NHS are still suggesting that some of the income that supported these investments, notably the COVID income, will be reduced, if not withdrawn completely next year. If I work on that assumption, our underlying deficit position increases quite markedly. That's still subject to NHS policy, Treasury, the Act of Treasury, but that is a risk that we are running at this moment in time. As a result of the new ED departments and the new assessment units that are going to sit behind them, there is quite a significant requirement for us to invest in staffing. That's not yet fully funded, obviously, because we've not signed contracts for that. Now, there's also within the business case an expectation that once we staff these new units, we will then be able to close significant numbers of our inpatient beds. The theory being that patients won't need to go into an inpatient bed because they will be treated and managed in the front part of the hospital and discharged appropriately. That again is a risk. There is a lot to do besides the building of a new ED department and a new set of assessment units. We have to recruit the staff. We have to change the way in which those acute pathways operate, and then we can assess whether or not we can safely remove some of our inpatient bed base. That again places enormous pressure on our financial position, because you won't be doing one at exactly the same time as the other, and we can only do these things safely. As I said there, the COVID assumptions, and unfortunately some of the savings that we've made both this year and last year have been non-recurrent in nature, and therefore that doesn't help our underlying financial position as we move forward. So the underlying financial position from my perspective, is not improving, and that's something that we need to look at. Now, that's not something that is singular to North Lincolnshire and Gaul. That is something that a number of acute organisations, a number of organisations across the NHS are experiencing at this moment, and certainly with the financial pressures posed by massive inflation, economic pressures, that position is likely to deteriorate yet further, as I'm sure you can appreciate. So in terms of risks, probably 3 risks from my perspective, and I think this hopefully complements what Peter was saying. 2/3 of our prospects is staffing. Peter talked about our issues with recruitment and retention. Workforce sustainability is a massive problem for us. We spend a lot of money on bank agency, on non-substantive staffing. So that's something that we have to get better at, and is a constant challenge for many of the specialties that we provide. The ageing estate. Walking around the hospitals, both at Grimsby and at Scunthorpe, you can't help but notice that actually it is looking a little tired in places, and whilst we might be able to upgrade 1 ward a year or so, that's not huge or massively significant improvements. And whilst we are doing work in the background on infrastructure like the oxygen that I mentioned, still a long way to go, and the assessment that Jug and his team do every year suggests that our backlog maintenance burden is growing by circa 10% each year, and it is in excess of £100 million now, which is why, just going back to Peter's point about the strategic importance of the organisation being included within the new hospitals fund is quite significant. And then the final thing is around operational productivity. We have, as the first slide that Peter put up described, we have done and undertaken more activity over the last 12 months compared to the previous, but there's still more to do. There is still waste in the system. There is still an inefficiency. If Sean was stood up here now, he would, I'd like to think he'd be nodding in agreement with that. So there is stuff that we can still do to make the patient experience and pathways shorter and leaner. And that's a key challenge, not only again for us, but for all of the organisations within the ICS. So for me, they're the 3 key activities that will be the key determinants of our financial position going forward. And that was it from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lee.
According to the agenda, colleagues, we said we've reserved questions till the end of the presentations, if that's okay. So please, if you can, hang on to what you've heard so far and reserve that until we've had all the presentations. That'll be, I think, probably an easier way to manage the time for us today. So if that's okay, can I now introduce Mark Sturridge, who's our director of for our audit company, which is our external audit company, Mazars, to give us a short overview of your audit opinion. Mark, thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me today. It's always a pleasure to come back to the governors and give you an overview of the work that we've done for the year and an independent perspective of how it's all gone. Fundamentally, the work we do as your external auditors is prescribed under legislation and defined by something called the Code of Audit Practice, which is set by the National Audit Office. We are responsible for broadly 3 things. An opinion on the financial statements, and you've seen that just briefly beforehand. We issue something called a commentary on value for money, which is, to be honest, it's an oxymoron, because you would think we're making a comment on value for money. Guess what? We don't. We have a look at underlying arrangements. And we also have wider reporting responsibilities. So that might be issuing essentially these are the nuclear options of public interest reports, or referring matters to the regulator if we identify anything of fundamental concern. The work we do on a day-to-day basis is predominantly through the audit committee. So your non-executives challenge us and receive our reports. That then flows up to the board of directors, so assurances flow through to the board, but ultimately we will always come back to you annually to give you a summation and that independent perspective and confirmation of the work that we do. So for 2020-21, so for the last year, 21-22, earlier on, Lee pointed out that the wording that sits in our financial statement opinion, which is essentially it's clean. What that means is that the numbers, the 260 odd pages in front of you are reliable. You can, they're reasonable, it's fair, and they are balanced. What they don't say is actually any of the context. So yes, it's great to have a clean opinion on the financial statements. That's what everybody wants. Something that's unqualified gives you the confidence that things are right. What it doesn't tell the story of is how complex things are and how challenging it was for a year. A number of factors came up through financial planning, changes in financial planning arrangements through the NHS. There were plans needed to be put in at the beginning of April. They were revised. Lee's team were incredibly busy at that point in time. At the same time as us having to do our work on an audit, which is, again, a substantial amount of time and input that goes into that. We issued our opinion on time. That enables you to the trust to have laid its accounts before Parliament in June, significantly in advance of a large majority of trusts in the country. We can only do that through the good work that your finance team produces. We work with about 45, 50 trusts. Your trust was the first in line in producing a set of financial statements. There were no errors. There were no fundamental concerns. We did not identify any serious financial control issues or matters arising. That's a really good result. It really is. You don't have to go too far from down the country. You'll find organisations where their work didn't even start until June after we'd concluded. So I want to give you that public confirmation. There's a lot of work that's gone into that, and the finance team have done a great job. We issue a report on commentary on economy, efficiency and effectiveness. That's the copy of that report is with you today. It looks at 3 areas. And again, the assurance I want to give you as a group of governors is that fundamentally there are no new matters arising. We've looked at budgetary control. We've looked at budget setting, how information flows into the budget and into the operation or delivery. We've looked at things such as how strategic risks are managed. We've looked at the operating effectiveness of the audit committee. We've looked at how performance information is used and informs decisions. We've looked at board reports and whether those are fair and balanced. And ultimately, through the annual report, you'll see things such as the annual governance statement, which talks about the internal control environment. Now, we never use a word better than adequate. So you'll never get superlatives from us. It stops me from getting into trouble. But again, yes, there are some fundamental issues, and you've heard about those. What I would say to you is the good news for you is there's no surprises there. I'm not coming to you today and telling you, oh, actually, the trust has got this, this, and this that they haven't told you about. So that transparency is very helpful for you as governors as well. It gives you that assurance that you are being given the right information as it comes through. We do issue these things. There's a couple of things in our report called significant weaknesses. Now, fundamentally, they're driven by the special measures and the Care Quality Commission. I'm not in a place to prejudge what the Care Quality Commission will do. I'm an accountant, and that's well within my remit. So what you'll see as a theme is that, yes, the trust has worked towards dealing with those issues. We know there's other things that needs to work out, but I'm not going to prejudge what the Care Quality Commission will say. We'll let them run their course. If I felt as though the trust was not acting on those, was not putting in place actions to deal with those underlying issues, then I would be reporting that to you. And that would lead to the third responsibility of mine, wider reporting issues, of which I have not had to do those. Again, that is a positive thing to say. So yes, there's significant challenges. You've heard about them today, but we are satisfied that the trust recognises those and is taking steps to deal with them within the remit and the control that it does have. I'm going to pause at that point, and again, I think you're doing questions later, so I'll leave it at that. But fundamentally, it is a yes, there's challenges, but it has been a good year.
Thank you very much, Mark. So that's great to hear that. So we've reviewed the year really from an operational, a finance and an audit perspective. The schedule here says we've got a 10-minute break, so if that's okay, we'll have 10 minutes now, and then we'll be delighted to introduce Sue Symington to talk to us about the integrated care system and all that's good about it, no doubt, Sue, and welcome to you today. So 10 minutes break, if that's okay, everybody. So back here at 25 minutes past 3. Thank you very much. Right, okay, ladies and gentlemen, and those colleagues online, welcome back to the second half of the meeting. It's my pleasure to be able to introduce Sue Symington, who is the chair of the Humber and North Yorkshire Integrated Care System. So Sue's got an update on how this is shaping up, and I'm sure you'll find it extremely interesting and very relevant. It's the direction of travel for this system that we're working in, and we're delighted that Sue's been able to join us today. So over to you, Sue. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm really delighted to be here today. Prior to doing this job, I was the chair of a trust with the Council of Governors, and I always liked the Council of Governors meetings. I always had nice relationships with the Council of Governors, and I felt a bit homesick really for Council of Governors. So this is great for me. And strangely enough, we used to meet at Malton Rugby Club, so also a slightly sporty venue. So I'm really pleased to be here. My name is Sue Symington. I have almost been the chair of the ICS for a year. What a funny year it's been. Prior to that, I was chair at York and Scarborough for 7 years, and before that I was a non-executive director at Harrogate for I think for 4 years. So I'm not an NHS lifer. I haven't done an executive role in the NHS. My background, my early background was with Betty's and Taylor's, so lots of manufacturing of tea and coffee, lots of baking. I ran Betty's Bakery for 4 years, and I eventually became HR director there. And then for about 10 or 12 years with my husband, we ran our own businesses, hotel and catering businesses, which we loved and enjoyed very much. But I always kept my hand in doing other bits of work. And as you hear, more latterly, as a non-executive director. And I'm also a non-executive director of the Beverley Building Society. I always think it's handy to know about someone, isn't it, before they speak, because you get distracted thinking, I wonder how she's doing that job. So that gives you a little bit of context about what I've done before. So I'm going to attempt to talk you through where we're at with the integrated care system. Sean's right. It's important for councils of governors to understand and know about integrated care systems, because they'll become yes, more important, but they'll encroach more and more on all of our lives in the NHS. So if I could have the first slide, please. So nationally, there are 42 integrated care systems. So England's been broken up into 42 patches. We're a large patch. I went to my first ever ICS chairs meeting in London about 6 months ago, and the first person I met, I introduced myself, said, hello, my name is Sue Symington. I'm chair of Humber and North Yorkshire ICS. And they said, oh, that's a large ICS. I said, oh, yes, it is, quite cheerfully. Second person I said exactly the same thing to me. And by the time the third person spoke to me, I thought, oh, right, OK, so we're known as a large ICS. So we're big compared to other ICSs. I think we might be the 9th or 10th largest. We serve 1.7 million people, and we'll have a budget in excess of £3 billion. £3 billion. So we're a significant ICS. ICSs, all 42 ICSs share the same 4 important priorities, if you like, objectives. The first is around population health. So these are the big initiatives which work nationally around the health of a population. So vaccination programmes, for example, smoking cessation, for example. So those big national population health issues for which we really work closely with local government. Local government, the directors of public health have got fantastic access to population health information. So that's the first thing ICSs have to do. They have to pay proper and real attention to the health of a population. The second thing that's really important for ICSs is health inequalities. And that's this really, really difficult thing that you'll all be aware of, where you live can predispose how long your life is likely to be. So if you live in East Hull, there's a chance that you'll live 10 or 12 years less than someone who lives in a leafy suburb of the same city. It's true in York. It's true across our geography. So health inequalities are a really important part of what ICSs do. The third thing that ICSs have to be good at, and this is a bit different for the NHS, is we have to understand that our health is determined by much more than just our access to a GP or access to a hospital. It's about where we happen to be born, how we happen to be educated, what our aspirations might be in life, how well we're able to access health services, our economic success. All of these things are determinants of health, and the NHS has to get good at understanding that about populations. So huge amount of work going on around these wider determinants of health. And the fourth, which you will be pleased to see, I'm sure, as a Council of Governors, is we have to really care about efficiency and productivity and doing the right things and stretching our money as far as we can. That's as you would expect. So this is asking the NHS to think differently, really, about what it does and look more broadly at what it does in terms of a society and a wider population. And for that reason, we have to work much more closely with our partners. So I think the next page, please. Oh, there you go. It's taken my punchline. 1.7 million people. You can see the geography. And some of these, astonishing figures. 550 care homes, private care homes, 4 acute hospital trusts, 3 mental health trusts. You can see it there. It's a big area, and we've got 28 key partners in our partnership. Next slide, please. Just to make those 4 big aspirations of ICSs more real for us, more real for our population, we think what that means for us is we want everyone to be able to start life well, live life well, age well, and end life well. So if we were going to organise our thinking about what it is we need to do, we'd probably put it in those 4 buckets, because that covers all the population that we serve and the various phases of life. As Sean said to me on the phone the other day, which bracket are we in now? We said, didn't we? We're definitely in the ageing well bracket, Sean and I. You said it, Sean. You said it. I'm afraid you did. So this, I guess, is our mantra in our organisation, that we want to be able to deliver against those 4 targets. Next slide, please. Well, this is a long list of things, isn't it? What I want to say here is that we know we will only be successful as an integrated care system if we're good partners and we create good, strong partnerships. We need to behave like partners, good partners. We need to treat one another like good partners, and we need to work in partnership in all that we do. You can see some lovely words there: a collaborative culture, honest public narrative, transformative appetite for innovation, etc., etc. You don't need me to read them out. The nuts and bolts of that is we need to be really good partners. We need to create partnership between all of those involved in delivering the wider determinants of health for the populations that we serve. And we've set about trying to achieve that. Next slide, please. Cool. So here's the bit where you need to really pay attention. Creating a brand new system is quite a difficult thing to do. Not least because it involves a lot of people, it involves a lot of services, and it's complex. So integrated care systems, all 42 are the same, are made up of an integrated care board. So that's a board of directors who are very similar to your trust boards, with responsibility for the NHS type things that you'd expect to see a trust board be responsible for. Alongside the integrated care board is an integrated care partnership. This is the new bit. This is the really interesting bit. This is where local government, the third sector, business possibly, education possibly, the NHS, where we come together to think about the health of our entire geography, the population health, and where decisions will be made about how best to organise ourselves, how best to spend our resources, and those areas that we most want to target. So integrated care boards, similar to a trust board. Integrated care partnerships, quite a new thing. This is where we think more broadly. But because we're a big ICS, we're broken into 6 places. And those places are coterminous with the local government areas, as you might expect. So North Lincolnshire, North East Lincolnshire, Hull, etc. So the ICP is the umbrella, if you like, and underneath that 6 places. And these places are almost completely set up now, and they're going to be led by local government chief executives. So they will lead the local place organisation, and they'll be supported by an elected member, usually the person who's chaired the Health and Wellbeing Board, usually, and supported by an NHS lead. And then they will create their own board, if you like, locally for each place. Our expectation is that about 80% of the money that passes through the Integrated Care Board will go to the Integrated Care Partnership and be distributed amongst the 6 places. So it does bring money closer to each geography, and the aim is that by working collectively, by paying attention to the Health and Wellbeing Board, paying attention to local providers and local people, the money can be better spent on tackling the issues that local areas face. So if you imagined places running like that, now you've got to think of a cross member, which are collaboratives. So this is about saying, to be a really strong system, we need to collaborate much more closely together. And I think listening to your directors this afternoon, they're already on with that, aren't they? So how great if all our acute hospitals could work more closely together? How might we improve what we do if we more closely work together? How better might we work if we could bring all our voluntary sector organisations together, if we could find ways of sharing what we want to do. So we've got 5 collaboratives in our partner. So you can pick in our partnership. So you can picture now that matrix of 6 places and 5 collaboratives. And the idea is in all of those areas that we work increasingly closely together. I'm just going to say that again. Integrated Care Board, like an NHS board. Integrated Care Partnership, where we all come together collectively, broken into 6 places and supported by 5 collaboratives where key areas of what we do work together. Yes, please. OK, well, that tells you a little bit more. Do you want me just to let you read that a moment? This, I think, is written a little bit, probably a few weeks ago. This place bit we're just developing now. So we've got named people for all our places. We've got agreed groupings. The Integrated Care Partnership has to do a very important thing by Christmas. it has to produce for the whole of the ICS our integrated health and care strategy. So that has to be done by Christmas, and that has to be a collective effort. So we're just at the beginning now doing that piece of work during the course of the autumn. It's not straightforward, as you can imagine, but it's important. Okay, next slide, I think. You really probably don't want to see that. That makes it look very complicated. I've gone out of my way to make it straightforward so you can picture it in your mind, but that gives you an indication of the 6 places. I think if the Chief Executive, Stephen Eames, were here now, he would say, and he's said it consistently, the action really will take place at place. That's where the work of the partnership will really go on. Yeah. Yeah, and that, I think you can have these slides afterwards, I think, if anyone who's fascinated to know this. This is just a decisions map about what each element will do and the decisions it will make. But it's not different to the thing I've just described to you. We nearly there? I think move on. Yes, so this gives you that overview, I expect. So here's the integrated care board as I described, and here's the partnership as I described. Clearly we take instruction, some instruction from the centre, from NHS England, and we seek to work with our 6 places. As you would imagine, just like your board will have, we've got 4 key committees of the board, an audit committee, of course, a remuneration committee, of course, a quality committee, and I think we'll establish a resources committee, which probably reflects what you do in your trust. And within the partnership, of course, there are some other committees. We've said from the beginning that we really don't want to create the most complicated organisation we can manage. Our aim will be to create, despite all of that, ICS light. That's our aspiration. So we've been diligent about that. And here are those sector collaboratives I described. So secondary care, mental health, primary care, community health and care, and the voluntary sector. So that's a better map, really, of governance and accountability. Those are the key stakeholders. Is there one more slide?
Yeah, you've got a few more actually.
Oh, well, that's who we all are. Next. And these are the key portfolios, the things you'd expect to see of the executive team. So the Chief Executive, Stephen Eames, who I've mentioned before, a Chief Operating Officer, clearly an FD, we couldn't survive without our finance directors, someone responsible for nursing and quality, Teresa Fennick, a clinical and professional lead, Nigel Wells, Dr. Nigel Wells, a people lead, Jane Adamson, corporate affairs, Karina Ellis, and communication and marketing, Anya Hasbrook. So that's the executive team of the ICS. Nearly that? I think we can stop now.
Yeah.
I think that's probably it.
You've just got 4 more actually, sorry.
Well, I'm a bit mindful of time. So again, something about our approach, that each place will know best what each population needs. And let me tell you, places aren't nervous about saying what they need and what they want and what's right for them. So we've had lots and lots of really healthy interaction with all the different places that we will work with. North Lincolnshire, in particular, we've developed a strong relationship with North Lincolnshire and North Lincolnshire Council, and also with North East Lincolnshire. So we feel that we've strong relationships in this geography south of the Humber. I suppose what I didn't say, I said I thought that probably about 80% of our resource will be focused around places. That did leave 20%, didn't it? And that will be for those things where we think just doing them once at scale will be better for the geography. So there will be things on which everyone will be agreed and that we can potentially do collectively together over the geography. And I think that's describing that a little bit. There are some areas where we can make bigger, faster improvements by working together over a larger area. And the next one. Okay, so guiding principles for place. We've talked about the importance of place. It says here, I think you'll be interested in this, decision making will be collaborative between local authority, voluntary sector, the NHS and other local organisations. So these will be decisions made for place by a collective of people who are committed to that place and the health of the people in that place, importantly. But this is relatively early days, and you might do well to invite me back in 6 months' time when we've built this a little bit more and we understand a little bit more about how we want to progress with this. There's a point at which it stops being my responsibility. So although I chair the ICP, the leadership is, as described, much of it local government. So we've set things up as far as we can go. Now it's genuinely over to the partnership. So I'm not disingenuous when I say I don't know what the next step is, because it won't be my decision. It will be the decision of the collective place leadership teams. Next slide, please. Yeah, keep going, I think. Oh, no, you'll be interested to know. For those of you in North Lincolnshire, your place director is Alex Seal. I think, does everyone know Alex? I think she's brilliant. She's great. So I think fantastic for you. And Peter Thorpe, the chief exec locally, will be the lead. And in North East Lincolnshire, the place director is Helen Kenyon. Again, probably many of you will know Helen, and Rob Walsh will be the leader. So it's council chief execs plus this NHS leader plus an elected member. So it's collaboratives I've described to you already. Great. Yeah, well, that's good because that's 20 minutes and that's what I was allowed. That was a whistle-stop tour. I know there's a lot to it, isn't there? You can have the slides, of course, to refer to. I'm happy to answer any questions later. I am also genuinely happy to come back at some other time if you need and want to know more. I would be pleased. I'd be very pleased to do that. So thank you for listening. Thank you for not heckling. I look forward to the next bit of your session. I'll answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sue. I'm sure it'll be really important for us to see you again as this thing is being built, and I'm sure colleagues will have some questions for you when it comes to the session in a few moments' time. So thank you very much for that. Now we've got to item 3.2, which is looking at our emergency department at Grimsby, and I'm not quite sure. Are we going to run the video first, and then we're going to have Natalie on the line? Is that the way we're going to work this?
Yeah, that's right.
All right, Simon. So
you might just have to bear with me.
yeah, okay. So we're going to run a VT, as they say. Shows my background here. So we're going to run this video on the emergency department. Then we're going to hook into Natalie at Grimsby, who is going to do a live walk around. And please, again, note any questions you may want to lodge with us as we go through.
Hi, and welcome to our new emergency department. I'm Natalie Till, I'm a matron for the ED. I'm going to take you on the tour. When you arrive, you'll be signposted to our reception area where you will be checked in by our receptionist and an initial assessment will be undertaken by a clinical practitioner. So this is our waiting room, and we've gone from an existing 20 seats because of COVID to approximately 52 adult seats. And we've also got a separate children's waiting area that's got an interactive floor and some play equipment for the children. In the new facility, we've had a lot of fundraising that's gone on, which has given us the ability to put a charging unit in so that no worries about your phone dying whilst you're waiting. And within the waiting area as well, we have a dedicated baby and mother room for breastfeeding and baby change. Welcome to Zone C. So thankfully for most of you that attend our department, this would be the side of it that you'll see. So we've got 6 urgent care service rooms, where you'll be seen by a nurse practitioner or a GP. So the improvements in this for both you as a patient and for the staff is the rooms are far more spacious, there's a lot more equipment that's been invested in, and we've actually got 6 dedicated UCS rooms. We've also got an area for flexing up from Zone B. In the event of that being full, we've actually got the ability to house more patients with the increase in rooms. So So this is your ambulance arrivals area. So what's different this time from our previous one is we've actually got scales in this area that we can actually weigh every patient so that the calculations are as they should be and in line with some of the nice guidelines that we've got that we have to work to. You'll then enter into ambulance handover where you'll be greeted by a senior nurse who will take handover from the ambulance crews and assess you to whether or not you are streamed through to a different service or whether you come through to our rapid assessment triage area. So this is Zone A, part of our ambulance handover area. So when you arrive by your ambulance, there will be a nurse ready to greet you. She will take all your information from the ambulance crew, and then you will be moved into this area, which is what we call rapid assessment triage. In this area, you can expect to have bloods done, ECG, and be sent for any radiology, X-rays, and CT scanning that you may require. The improvements of this from our existing services at this moment in time, we're in quite a confined space, trying to do rapid assessment and ambulance handover all in one small zone, which is only designed for 4 patients. This area now will give us 5 rapid assessment rooms plus 3 ambulance handover spaces. So this is Zone B, where once you've been through rapid assessment, you will come into what is our majors area, where you will be then greeted by a member of staff who will be your named nurse. You will also then have a doctor who will continue the care from rapid assessment. And from here, you will either be admitted into the hospital or you'll be discharged home. Through the build, we've managed to increase and improve the equipment that we've got. So every single room will have the capability of monitoring a patient. So even those patients that have been stepped down from the resuscitation area, we have the ability to now observe those patients. We also have a fit to sit area within Zone B for those patients that are well enough not to be on a trolley but are still requiring majors care. Again, you can see those patients from the nurses' base, and there will be a dedicated nurse with those patients at all times. In this area as well, we do have a mental health room which is furnished and a very calming environment for those patients who are awaiting further assessment. It also comprises of a ensuite for those patients for privacy and dignity. So this is our resource, and it is designed to have 8 patients that are critically ill and that can be monitored. So each room has got a glass wall so that every patient can be monitored and seen all the way through their journey. At this moment in time, we're working with a resource that's only 4 spaces and is all within capacity. For us now to have 8 spaces will make a significant difference to patient care and the staff. So this is one of our dedicated paediatric rooms, and as you can see, we've done a lot of fundraising for this area. We've got the interactive ceiling, and this is an area that's set separately from where the adults are to keep that safety and childlike environment. So now we're moving into the new emergency department. The next stage of the project will continue. So the existing ED as it is will be then completely reconfigured to make room for a same-day emergency care area and an IAAU. So the location of the same-day emergency care area in the integrated assessment unit will start to improve some of the flow that we have out of A&E and the patient pathways, and being able to stream those patients directly to that area from the emergency department, reducing some of the delays that have been previously seen.
Is very short as nominations close on the 11th of October. And the next slide, please, demonstrates why it's vital that we unearth some new talent to fill a number of vacancies we have on the Council of Governors. This is partially due to the retirement of 2 of our most distinguished governors. I'm sure you'll all wish to join with me in thanking and paying tribute to the contributions made by our longest serving governor, Mo Dobson, who is retiring having first been elected back in 2007. And to my immediate predecessor as lead governor, Brian Page, who has served since 2015. But as you can see, this leaves a big gap in the number of public governors, particularly in North East Lincolnshire, where we have 3 vacancies, and in North Lincolnshire, where there are 2. So, to any of our members who might be interested in becoming a governor, particularly in North East Lincolnshire and North Lincolnshire, please make yourselves known to myself or to the Foundation Trust Office, and we will be pleased to explain to you what the role involves. And to existing governors, please let me know if you're aware of anybody suitable who you think might be interested in becoming a governor. So that's it. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ian. And again, just to say and endorse your thanks to Mo and Brian for their long and distinguished service as governors. It's very much appreciated. And yeah, please, yes, a round of applause for very appropriate. Thank you very much. So we're now moving into questions. I don't know, Aid, whether we've got any questions lodged from those that were joining us.
We do.
Oh, do we? Okay, right. And then Natalie, is Natalie back with us?
She is, it should be.
She's there. I can see her on this screen. Can we get her on that one?
We can only do one camera at a time. I think my
Oh, is it too risky?
has crashed in Grimsby. Yeah, so I think that's the reason.
Should be all right, though.
If you give me right now, yeah.
Okay.
Each roll. This is it.
Oh, turn that off.
Oh, is it too risky?
Yeah.
That's a step too far.
Been far too much for me today. Right, so let's just go in this room if we can at the moment for any questions from any source on anything you've heard today. We've heard from Peter, from Lee. We don't have our auditors here today. We've heard from Sue, and we've had a really good look at the Grimsby Emergency Department. And any questions about the governor elections and posts there. Very happy to hear any questions on the topics we've heard today or anything else, by the way. Sir. Oh, yes.
Yes, on the subject mentioned by both Peter and by Lee, the new hospitals fund and the application that we are in the process of submitting. Now, whilst acknowledging that it's not anywhere near been approved yet, and even should it be so, it will take quite a number of years to actually deliver. I noticed that a good proportion of that is allocated towards Scunthorpe, which is where we're currently sitting. So I make no apology for asking the question about that. And I must say 320 million doesn't sound very much for a new hospital to me, but there we go. But the question really is, should that be approved and should it be delivered in the medium term? What is therefore the future for the existing Scunthorpe hospital site? And how does it sit with the investment we're currently making in A&Es and so on? Are they just a sticking plaster until we hopefully get to the point of a new hospital? And as an adjunct to that, and asking what the future is for the site, would the intention be to dispose of the site if the new hospital should be up and running?
Okay, Paul, I think Peter's ready to answer those questions.
Well, I'll do my best. Very good. Sorry, let's get towards the sorry. Very good question. And it's been asked by, among others, local MPs. Why are you spending all this money on a new ED and so on at Scunthorpe when you're trying to build a new hospital in the town centre? And it's about timings, and it's about the number of patients that we will be seeing in that period. So if we are successful, and I say if, because it was a big if at the start, the state of the British economy probably makes it an even bigger if. If we are successful, the lead-in time to get through all the necessary formal approvals, different stages of business cases and so on, design, etc., means that even if we got a positive announcement this, say this winter, I don't think we'd actually bring the first bulldozer in to the town centre to build the new hospital much before 2025 or 26. That's just, I'm afraid, the nature of the planning for these things. and then it takes 3 or 4 years to build. So even if everything goes swimmingly, we're talking 8 to 10 years. And the history of NHS hospitals is that actually you usually have to have 2 or 3 stabs at this before you get to the top of the list. And, you know, I was involved many years ago in the final stages of the new University College Hospital in London. It felt great to do the deal and design the hospital. But I was the 5th chief executive over 25 years who tried to do that. And I was just the lucky one who happened to be when it got to the top of the queue. So what we're doing is we're working as hard as we can with the town council, with the borough council about the town centre site. We may pull it off, but we are also realistic enough to know that we might be well into the 2030s before a new hospital comes. That means at the rate of 350,000 patients a year times 15 years, you can imagine the need for decent facilities in that period. So that's why we will continue to develop what we can. You know, we've just upgraded another ward and we'll continue to try to provide the best facilities. There are 2 other things in there. First of all, what would we do about the site? The answer is we would dispose of it. That's our current thinking, although that far in advance, it's possible thinking would change. The other thing I would say that with that timescale, I do want to go back to the risk I mentioned earlier, and the expert on this is Joe Johal, our Director of Estates and Facilities. But the state of Scunthorpe Hospital in particular, its critical infrastructure, means that we will probably end up still propping up the hospital in a metaphorical sense a lot over that period, because there are aspects of that hospital which are going to get worse and worse. And there are serious risks around the future of that hospital. And it may be that we will need to invest quite a lot of money just to keep it going because of the nature of the estate. And I have to say that is the biggest headache we have at the moment, that people like Jug and Lee and Ivan McConnell, our Director of Strategic Development, are trying to get our heads around, is how do we get the capital to keep Scunthorpe Hospital going for that period. And you'll be hearing at future councils, governors meetings and so on, how we try to shape that, because as you'll be aware, the NHS is desperately short of capital. It always has been, which is why hospitals have been allowed to get to the state that they are. And we're not alone. Doncaster, Airedale, others need this investment just as much as us. But we have to work against that backdrop. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter. Does that answer your question?
As well as it can at the moment.
Yes, of course, there's quite a lot of uncertainty about it, but I mean, we've got great people working in poor hospital conditions. We need to have great people working in great conditions, and at least the EDs that we can see there are a step in the right direction. So it's as good as we can do at the moment. Right, David.
Yes, my question is about the ICS. Is Sue still here?
Sue's still here, yeah.
Yeah, still there. It's about public perception of, I hate to say this, but the public perception is not, oh no, not another layer of bureaucracy and management. How are we getting this message over to the public? Because coincidentally, yesterday I was with some friends, and out of the blue, somebody asked me that very question about management levels in hospitals. And you've just set me off again by saying there's it all starting again. The public perception, that's what I'm worried about.
I think you make a really good point. When I was doing my due diligence and wondering whether to apply for this job or not, I spoke to lots of different people, including people who work in NLAG. Everybody said, what we don't want is something complicated, bureaucratic and tricky that gets in the way. So that's very, very firmly in our minds. That's the start point. The second thing is that, of course, we replaced 6 CCGs. So the clinical commissioning groups all stopped at the end of June and have been replaced by 1 ICS. And people have chosen to change jobs and do different things in that time. So I think our core even now is a smaller group of people than it was when we had 6 CCGs. And as you can imagine, there's probably economy in terms of estates as well. Only this week we've been talking about how will we communicate that with the public. So this definitely isn't about setting up a complicated bureaucracy, which is more management. It's about working out what we can do to be supportive. And actually, you know, the point of working in partnership is that we will work more closely with all of our colleagues that we can leverage the skills of those around us. And we think of your board of directors and the skills that they all bring. How will we all work more closely together? So I can provide you with that assurance now to say it's on our minds. And again, later, I think we'll be able to evidence that that's been on our minds in the ways in which we've worked. You're all familiar with the NHS. You'll know the temptation in the NHS to turn everything into something terribly complicated. But we really are holding back on that. That isn't what we want to do with our ICS at all. And yeah, alongside that, and Peter, I'm sure will comment on this, we report into a region, so the NHS is broken into 7 regions, and I think the view would be that if ICSs become successful, we've got less need for regional offices and those regional. I'd say it's a fast-moving situation. The centre, NHS-INE, are charged with making 50% from guns. So they've got a very, very, very big mandate. Size of their central. The NAP will be working better.
Okay. Further questions from the room then, colleagues? Anything else? Aid, can you help us out with questions from the public online, please?
I can. First one is for, I think, for Peter. Was the mention of the CQC. Somebody's asked, is there any idea of what the might say?
Peter. Or Kate.
I'm tempted to throw that at Dr. Kate Wood,
who's been
the architect of our response over the last 2 years. Kate, would you like to give the clever answer to that?
Yeah, come on, Kate. Yeah.
You could just say no.
Oh, goodness me. Hello there, my name is Kate Woods. For those that don't know me, I'm the medical director and I'm also the lead for the CQC assurance response from the organisation. I took over, thanks to Peter's intervention, leading the CQC response 2 years ago. And over those 2 years, we've spent a lot of time working both with the CQC and understanding the report that they produced. And we can all read the hundreds of pages of words, but it's the stuff that sits behind the words that's far more important. But not just working with the CQC, obviously far more importantly, working with the staff within the organisation and working with the whole team, the 6,500 staff in our organisation, to improve the care that we deliver to our patients. And what has happened over those 2 years has been a complete transformation in the way that we have overseen the delivery of care and changed the pathways of care that we are delivering. And you can see that in a number of different ways. Our mortality rates have changed so dramatically over the last few years, but you've also seen the work from a performance perspective with regards to the way that our waiting lists are managed and the support that we're providing to other organisations, having actually been in a really difficult position ourselves. The question that was asked was about the feedback, or do we have a sense of what the CQC report would show? The CQC will report on what they have found on the time when they were here within our organisation, and what they will be saying is what they perceive at that time in the day. The feedback that we have had over the past 2 years and from that period of time is that they have not found anything that significantly concerned them enough to write us an official letter to say that we needed to be doing things differently. Now, that's not great reassurance to anybody standing in the room, or indeed for our patients, but what we do know is that the fact that we have not had a poor communication is actually far better than we have ever had in this organisation in the last 3 visits that we've had from the CQC. So, in direct answer, no, we have not had an indication as such. I really look forward to us seeing the report, the interim report coming in for factual accuracy, which should be in mid to end of October, When we receive that, that will come into us confidentially for us to check for factual accuracy. And as Peter said earlier, we will then November, December or January get our final report. What we do need to do, though, is we need to build on the work that we have done over the last few years. And we have worked with the CQC in developing different ways that we gain our assurance. And I think that our non-executive colleagues that are in the room today will probably agree, hopefully agree with me, that the way that we provide our reports and the way we provide the assurance of what's happening on our ward level in our direct patient facing roles has changed dramatically over the last few years. And hopefully, well, I know that through the reports that we provide, people do feel more assured. Still work to do. Does that help? Does it answer?
I think you could have been a bit braver, honestly. I think you'll have a big smile on your face. Let's hope so. Anyway, as Kate has said, there's nothing that we've heard that suggests this will not be a much improved position. I think that's fair to say, Peter.
There's nothing that we've heard, but we know the CQC can bring surprises.
Yes, we do. Okay, well, let's be optimistic. The effort that I've seen that people have been putting in responding to the demands that the CQC have put down from previous reports, and the response and preparation that went into this visit was just outstanding, in my opinion. I'd like to thank everybody that was involved in that. It's a very demanding period and quite a worry, as people will know. And everyone's put their best effort into it, so I'm really proud of people that actually did that response on the time at the time they did it. So let's be optimistic and see where we are in a short number of weeks' time. Aid, another question, please.
Yeah, there is, which is about finances. Given the amount of loans we've got, underlying deficits, how come we're still a going concern?
Oh, right. I think this is one for Mr. Bond. Would you like to come up and?
Relatively straightforward answer to this one. So the definition of a going concern and the opinion that Mark and his team have to make requires them to make an opinion based on our ability to continue to trade for a period of 12 months. At this moment in time, we've got 60 million in the bank. We've got contracts with our providers. There's no shortage of customers. So I have a suspicion that we will be able to survive for 12 months. That was agreed with our audit committee. That suggestion was put to the auditors and they concurred. So for the next 12 months, we're able to continue, and as such, we're able to prepare our accounts as a going concern. Okay,
thank you very much, Lee. Aid, is there anything else?
Yeah, what about the ED?
The ED, okay.
Which unfortunately
we can't get to Natalie then. Okay.
But it's about, how confident are we that we can fully staff it, and how much of a difference do we think it makes to performance?
Okay, Sean, do you want to come up and just answer that, please? I'm sorry, you're going to have to face the music in the camera.
My hair and makeup.
Oh, I think you did.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Sean Stacey, for those that don't know me, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at NLAG. So to answer that question, we began a recruitment campaign several months ago with regard to nurses and doctors for the new emergency department. That recruitment campaign has actually been reasonably successful. And I say reasonably because unfortunately we are beholden to the immigration authorities for elements of it, bringing nurses and doctors from overseas to join our workforce. As Peter alluded to earlier, we have already had some success there, but we are waiting for further. So as we go into opening the department, there are still some remaining gaps. But generally, the department will be able to function fully, and by Christmas, we hope that we will have the Grimsby department fully staffed. And we are commencing that, of course, because of the opening of the department in Scunthorpe early enough to enable that to happen. I hope that answers your question.
And performance was the other question.
Oh, was it? I missed the performance question. What was the performance question then?
Is it going to have an impact?
Okay, so buildings themselves don't have an impact on performance. It's very much about the things that we've been doing behind the scenes. And so as Kate has alluded to, and Peter did in his presentation to you all, we've been working really hard on different pathways for patients to go through. The advantage of the new department, as Natalie showed you in her absolutely amazing presentation, shows you we can now segregate people into areas that is actually designed for the demands that you've heard about from Peter. So generally, we should be able to see people in a faster time and keep flow moving. But we still need to do all the work that we're doing with our system partners that Sue's referred to in Northern Lincolnshire, that Peter referred to in his presentation about the reducing the reduction in length of stay and the reduced time you spend in hospital when you don't need to be there. We need to go still further on that to keep the department from clogging up, from those fantastically equipped cubicles simply having you there when actually you need to be in a ward bed. So we will see some improvement, certainly in ambulance handover. We will see a continued improvement in those patients that come into our ED and actually can go home from there. So at the moment, if you have a minor injury or a minor illness, or you have an illness that can be treated by the emergency department, in 98% of people that hit us, even today, you will go home within 2 hours. And we hope to be able to continue that and grow on that. And through the work that we'll be doing with the same day emergency care unit opening shortly, and through the work that we continue to do around pathways, we will see substantial improvement in our A&E performance over the next 12 months.
Very much, Sean. Thank you. Is that the end of the questions then, Aid? Any more questions from colleagues in the room? Rob.
Sorry about this. But Sue's here.
Please, yeah.
Just want to ask about place again. So you're saying you're leaving it to the CEOs of the principal authorities. So that would be the case. How are you going to stop that process of building a team locally, particularly engaging with neighbourhood? I can't quite believe you're not giving them any kind of direction on that. I'm still on it.
But we do over these next 3 months. It's headlined what we want. So who wouldn't wish for an improved mortality for a better starting line for which? So what will our high level be? What will be the local matter? I think because we work there are breaks there on that politicisation. We have experienced it, that slightly political bit or quite territorial behaviour. I think we understand now that it's going to be a process. We're going to take some time. We're going to need to be respectful and mindful, but recognise that particular areas will have particular issues. So, and that's why I say this is very important.
Is there an overarching prescription definition of neighbourhood? Back to the local thing.
No, I think places will decide that. And as I said, from my perspective, I'm the chair of the 2 boards. The stage we're at now is this becomes the workplace, and it's not to be prescribed by the ICS. You're right, we will have some high level guidance, but it will be to do with those places to work out how best they think they should be organised.
Thank you.
Okay, Rob, thank you for that question. Any further questions from colleagues in the room or nobody else online? We've exhausted those. Thank you. Right, so thanks very much for that. Very briefly then, item 5 is really a chance to have a quick reflection on the format of this meeting. Let's take the technology of all glitches out of the commentary, if you don't mind. But anybody got anything to say that can improve how we've worked this process today? Any comments, any builds on what we've done? David.
comment.
Yeah, David, thank
From
you.
experience, Sue's just been saying something that Rob has. I doubt if the people online could hear that.
Yeah, a roving
I think
mic would be better. Yeah,
pass round those speaking.
yeah, yeah. That's a great point, and that'll be the case for next time. I think the attraction of doing it this way is with the potential of hooking in for hundreds of people. And I think for me, this is promoting this in a way that gets people engaged, which is the job that we'll take on outside, is really important. So the potential of having a very wide range of connections, I think, is there for us.
Just a suggestion. I don't know what Aid has to say about this, but how about publicising this meeting rather more broadly? We notify our membership.
Yes.
That this is taking place, but I don't read the local press and so on. But I've not seen any evidence of any, invitation to the public at large.
Yeah. Any comments on that, Aid?
It needs to be all over our social media website for a while. I mean, the fact that we have this meeting generally not very interesting local newspapers. Although, it should be. But we'll take that on board. We'll have a think about what else we can.
Yeah. Further promotion.
I wasn't thinking about newspapers. Right, social media is probably the way.
Yeah, I mean, it's.
I don't really participate.
Yeah, well, there's so.
I've not seen it.
No, we've got really good social media connections, I would say, if you hook into those. But it's whether people are prepared to spend the time, really. But all we can do is offer and keep promoting. So that's a great point. Thank you. Anything else people would like to raise about the way this has been run today? No. Sorry.
Can I just say a big thank you to our communication assistant? It's happened to all of us, but not in front of a governor's annual meeting. Totally well, mate.
Yeah, well done, Simon. Let's give him a round of applause. Yeah. Yeah, so it actually did help to promote my sidelining ventriloquism, so I'm looking for bookings later on. Right, any other items? So yes, there is an item for information in your pack, which is a glossary of terms, which is always helpful. I'll just refer you to that. There's not a point for discussion. And just ask for anybody any points of any other business that may want to raise today. No, I'm not seeing that. Okay, in that case, then I will close today's meeting and just remind colleagues that the next Council of Governors meeting is on the 13th of October at 2 o'clock at Forest Pines, and you'll be very welcome to that meeting. We very much look forward to working with you going forward. So thank you all very much for your attendance, and I wish you a very pleasant evening and look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you all very much.